This is a phrase and a passage I've been thinking a lot about for years and years. And this passage that this is part of may be one of the biggest things that changed my life. And so I thought it would be worthwhile to just dig into it. But first, I need to show you the video that was happening on the internet this week. Have you seen this already?
No,
This is an aquarium. It's a mall in like Dubai or someplace. You ready?
Wow.
Watch this.
Have mercy.
Whoa.
Now, I'm going to play it again.
Why?
The thing that you should know about that is that that's AI generated.
I was going to say, I wonder, it's almost all
Okay.
all these things. There's tons of these videos.
You
now.
knew that?
Yeah.
So that little 2-second video relates somewhat to this phrase we're looking at, doesn't it? You know? And then it's not just the AI generated stuff. We have this quote from an independent journalist from like 6 years ago. He says the news has become a choose your own adventure game. Outlooks like all our favorites, or whatever, don't just report, they curate realities for their audiences, cherry-picking facts to fit the story they're selling. So it's like, you've probably been thinking about this. I've been thinking about it. It's getting to the point where you don't even know what the facts are anymore, much less, well, what's real and what isn't, and then what's the truth, and what does it mean? So that got me going on tonight's Bible study. And so I looked up the words deceive, deceit, and deception, and related words. And, the question is, does the Bible have anything to teach us about being deceived? Well, there's 163 mentions. Certain people here will be glad to know we're not going through all 163 here tonight. But let's quickly try to pull out the main themes. And here's the first one. There's like 50 of these where if you just go through, in like every case, either stated explicitly or it's implied that deceiving someone is a bad thing. And look at all these places. And the ones in white here near the top, those are just the Psalms. If you look up the word deceive, deceit, deception, deceived in the Psalms, it shows up all the time. And every single time, the basic message is, that ain't right. Okay?
Politicians lie all the time.
And here's the one that particularly will say that again nice and clearly.
Politicians lie all the time.
We might touch on that later. Hold that thought. But here's the one that stood out to me the most. Psalm 5, verse 6. The Lord abhors the man of bloodshed and deceit. Abhors. That's quite a word, isn't it? To shrink back with shuddering from. To regard with horror and detestation. To feel excessive repugnance towards. And to detest to extremity. To loathe. So that's how the Lord feels about deceit. To detest in extremity. Well, anyway, that's not the only one in the Psalms. Here's another one, 26:4. I do not sit with deceitful men. It's like I can't even stand those kind of people to be around me. Psalm 101. He who practices deceit shall not dwell within my house. Again, just keep that away from me. I can't stand it. Well, so that's just a sort of interesting little commentary, and maybe it gives us some insight into this maybe not that clear verse from Christ from the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. So maybe part of what he's saying there is, We shouldn't be trying to spin people. Okay, you've made it through point 1 of tonight's
3 points?
3 points. Alas, there are sub-points. Okay, the Lord abhors deceit. Okay, now here's a phrase you probably heard. And if your parents were here, they probably heard it a lot more than the rest of us.
Yeah.
The world, the flesh, and the devil. That's like a standard model for where temptation comes from, right? And it's actually used more in the Western Christian world, particularly the Roman Catholic world. But I looked it up because it actually fits this discussion of deception here, as you'll see. And you know where that comes from? That comes from Saint Cassian, who's a church father, a theologian, and a monk. And he's sort of in that period, after Constantine, but while, the main Christological crises are going on. And he's from Scythia Minor, which is sort of out there in Romania, I think. Not sure. But he is the first person that's recorded as putting these 3 sources of temptation into like a single sentence. And here it is. From the Conferences, one of his writings. By the way, he wrote in Latin, which is why maybe he's bigger in the West than he is in the Greek Orthodox world, or Eastern Orthodox world. He says, the monk is assailed on all sides by the desires of the flesh, which rise from within, by the allurements of the world, which entice from without, and by suggestions of the evil one, who seeks to lead us into error. So there it is. 1, the world. 2, the flesh. 3, the devil. You like that scary 3 I found? Okay. So let's take a look at what the Bible has to say about deception and being deceived from these 3 categories. Well, the first one is the world. And it seems, if you look at all these passages about deception in the Bible, that when it talks about the world, it's talking about deception that comes from other people, especially teachers and authorities, and false prophets are big. False prophets. So this appears multiple times as a source of deception, and here's one from Jeremiah. Then the Lord said to me, the prophets are prophesying falsehood in my name. I have neither sent them, nor commanded them, nor spoken to them. They are prophesying to you a false vision, divination, and futility, the deception of their own minds. And then when I think about false prophet stories, here's one of my favorites. This is from Chronicles, where Jehoshaphat the king is hanging out with Ahab the king. Ahab is not a good guy. But anyway, now the king of Israel, that's Ahab, and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting each on their throne. They're getting set to go to war, arrayed in their robes, and they were sitting at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria. They're getting set to march out to war through the gate. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Kenana, made horns of iron for himself and said, thus says the Lord, with these you shall gore the Arameans until they are consumed. That was a false prophet. Okay? Then they bring in, after this, they bring in the real one. He says, by the way, Ahab, you're not coming back from this battle. So this is a general category of people who do deceive people. And, you could call them authorities, you could call them false prophets. And in general, they are yes men. They're there to say, yes, I'm absolutely sure that whatever the establishment wants is the right thing. But we don't have any false prophets like that now, do we? Okay, and then another one is, you mentioned this just a minute ago.
Yes.
Is from Isaiah. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, O scoffers who rule this people. Who's supposed to hear the word of the Lord? Isaiah's talking. The people who rule, not just the king, the entire ruling class, right?
Yes.
Who are in Jerusalem. Because you have said, he says, you need to hear the word of the Lord, because you have said, we made a covenant with death, and with hell we have made a pact. The overwhelming scourge will not reach us when it passes by. Why? For we have made a falsehood. We have made falsehood our refuge, and we have concealed ourselves with deception. So there you go. What's another category of people out there who deceive people? What kind of people are categorized here? You can call them politicians. See,
Yes, yes.
Mark wasn't, you weren't naming individual parties or anything. You weren't
Yes.
partisan.
Yes.
But can you put up with 2 or 3 minutes of fun time from the book of Revelation?
Revelation.
They're on the book of Revelation. Here's a very interesting little thing. And it says in Revelation 17:9, here is the mind which wisdom has. Of course, everything's symbolic. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So, which are the 7 mountains the guy's talking about? And who is the woman? Well, obviously, the 7 hills are the 7 hills of Rome. Okay? There they are. There's a little map of them. You count them. And who's the woman? Same chapter. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names and having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones, pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of unclean things from her immorality. And on her forehead was written a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So who is Babylon the Great? Well, she sits on the 7 hills. Isn't that something? Had you ever heard that before? Pretty obvious.
She sounds like a nice,
And you just continue,
woman.
and just continuing right on, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. Now, isn't that an interesting perspective on the established government of the Roman Empire? And there's sort of a tension between that and Romans 13, right? Where Paul writes, every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. So somehow between the time when Paul is writing and when John gets his revelation, the authors of the scriptures' perception of the status of the government of the Roman Empire has completely shifted from they're established by God to I saw Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, and I saw that she was drunk with the blood of the saints. You think that kind of violation is what made the shift in the perception of the rulers? So once again, politicians are another category of people who do it, who deceive us, and fun time is done. That was only 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so here we are. We've got 2 subcategories here. As far as the world goes, of sources of deception. We're skipping that slide. But the big one in the New Testament that gets mentioned multiple times is, well, here's an example. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, They will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires. And for 2 John, for many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the antichrist. So the final category is false teachers. And here's like the final proof verse. And this is actually the scary one. But false prophets also arose from among the people. He's talking about the time of Moses. Just as there will also be false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, Christ, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. Peter, he knows what he's talking about. He says that inside the church there's going to be false teachers that will deceive people. Okay. So that's the world. And the next one is the flesh. Okay. Romans 7:14 says, I am of flesh, sold into bondage to sin. And then it also says, for sin, taking an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So when you're talking about sources of deception, sin within us is one of the things that deceives us. And here's another one from Hebrews. But encourage one another day after day, as long as it's still called the day, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So one source of deception is the world, people outside of us. Another one is the sin that's working within ourselves. But there's another one which you might say is a subset of that, but let's take a look at it. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish, so he may become wise. If anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. And if anyone thinks himself to be religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. So another source of deception is us deceiving ourselves. And this might show up whenever you try to help people who are in serious trouble, right? You find that a lot of the source of the serious trouble is where they think things and they think they're doing better, or they think better about themselves and what's happening and how they're doing than is rational. So another one is, as far as the flesh goes, is deceiving yourself from pride. Okay, well, we made it through the world. We're making progress, right? Oh, by the way, so here we go. The world is from other people. It's outside of yourself. And the flesh is from sin and pride, which is inside yourself. Isn't that interesting? Well, that brings us down to the last category, the devil. And like from the very beginning, Eve says from the Garden of Eden, the servant deceived me. And then at the very end, in the book of Revelations, the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil, and Satan, who deceives the whole world. So yeah, it's true. The devil deceives the whole world. And by the way, here he is. Christ himself was in the wilderness being tempted by the devil. Now we could stretch this out for another 45 minutes and have a discussion of how the devil operates according to the Bible and how it affects us. But how about we just stick with what Saint John said for tonight, which is that the monks are assailed, Christians are assailed by suggestions from the evil one.
That's not Saint John.
Saint John Cassian,
Cassian.
the monk. There we go. So there we go. The model from Saint John actually matches up with the scripture as you read it through, all 163 of them. These are like the main themes, right? The world from other people, outside yourself, from sin and pride, from inside yourself, and suggestions seemingly from yourself, but actually outside yourself. Okay, let's go back and read his quote again. The monk is assailed on all sides by the desires of the flesh, which rise within, like we said, the allurements of the world, which entice from without, and by suggestions of the evil one. That's pretty interesting. And, first, this was a bottom-up inductive study. I read all 163 of them, put them in categories, said, wow, that's the world, the flesh, and the devil. And then looked up who was the source of that. And it's, our saint, Saint John Cassian.
Really?
Okay, so here we are. We basically made it through. First thing you need to know is that deception, the Lord abhors it. He regards it with horror and detestation. And the world, the flesh, and the devil are the sources of deception for us that we have to deal with. There you go. I just summarized 163 verses for you. But before we finish, I just want to spend another couple minutes on this passage that got me started. The explicit warning. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. So James is writing to Christians. Probably pretty good Christians, because they're his beloved brethren. Right? And he says, do not be deceived. Why would he say that? Unless you could be deceived. It could be me that gets deceived. It could be anyone. Okay? So let's look at the whole little passage here. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. So that's one thing that you should not be deceived about. When sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. And then he says, do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. Okay, so there we go. Those are the two things he has to say about don't be deceived. And which one do you think is more important? Sin brings forth death, or every good thing comes from our Father?
Do not be deceived.
Well, do not be deceived, but which of the two things should you not be deceived about? That sin brings forth death, or that every good thing comes from our Heavenly Father? Well, this is, once again, where the Orthodox worship comes in. Not only is it drenched in Scriptures, but it helps you understand the Scriptures. Which is more important? Well, which one do we say every week after having communion before we're about to leave church? They call that the prayer behind the ambo. But the priest reads this big long thing, O Lord, who dost bless them that bless thee, da-da-da-da-da-da. For every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from you, the Father of lights. He quotes that. He doesn't quote every week when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Well, we should be concentrating
I don't
on.
think he says that at all, ever in the literature.
I don't think so either. But every week they say that as the thing you should remember when you walk out the door.
It's not just every week.
Every divine liturgy. Well, yes.
Yeah. See, I
Us
think,
Orthodox, we like to have them, don't we?
well, to find out where the ambo is, you listen for that prayer.
There
He's
you
gonna
go.
say it at the end.
None of this, but I'm
But we
glad.
drag it out every time the bishop comes.
There you go. So now we're done, except for the discussion. God abhors deceit. And the sources of deception are the world from other people outside of ourselves, from sin and pride inside of ourselves, and from suggestions that seem like they're from yourself, but are actually outside of yourself. And one of the key things that'll change your life, if you're convinced, is if you're convinced that sin, when it's accomplished, brings forth death, you're not going to want it. And if you're convinced that every good thing and every perfect gift is from the Father of lights, you're going to love him and you're going to follow him. So, do not be deceived, my beloved brethren.